Welcome to The Sound of Soundtracks, starring Dave Lubin.
Welcome to episode 6 of The Sound of Soundtracks. Thank you for joining me. My name's David Lubin, and I'm happy to welcome my brother on the show, Robert Lubin. This is my 6th show, and this is the second time I'm going to do a ranking show. Today, we are going to play the very best of James Bond. So James Bond movies all had theme songs, and as much as I'm not really a big fan of James Bond movies, I am actually a big fan of the theme songs, and this was actually one of the first CDs I bought. I used to listen to this CD frequently in my car, and I used to play this CD all the time, even though probably I've only seen maybe 2 or 3 of these movies. So I pretty much know all the James Bond theme songs, so I was able to pick my favorite 5. But I wanted to have someone who is a true James Bond fan on the show, and therefore I picked my brother Robert, who actually introduced me to my very first James Bond movie when I was extremely young, that being Goldfinger, and he was very into it, and I found out that he's always been into James Bond movies. So Robert, thanks for coming on the show today.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me on the show. This is very much a good time, and I'm looking forward to a fun show. You're right. I've always been a James Bond fan. You know, Bond started in the very early 60s. I was too young, really, to watch the first few. And I heard a lot about James Bond, and I was always curious about him. And then one day I had a cousin named Donald who said to me, there's a triple feature of James Bond. And he said, why don't we just sneak out of the house, meet up, and go to this triple feature? I don't think we were much more than 9 or 10 or 11, somewhere around there. But we both took off. We went down to the theater. Neither of our parents knew where we went. And we were literally gone all day watching these 3 James Bond movies. They were Dr. No, Goldfinger, and From Russia with Love.
So the first 3.
Yeah, and I just was so into it. The first time I watched it, I just was sad when I had to leave the movie theater. I was hoping for a 4th and 5th. So from that point, I just love James Bond. I've seen all the James Bonds. I have not seen some of the offbeat ones, some of the non-traditional ones, the spoofs, things like that. But any of the true James Bond films, including the one Never Say Never Again, which wasn't exactly James, that was almost like an alternative James Bond because Sean Connery came back, but Roger Moore was already James Bond by then. But he got the one film. Now, I've seen the couple of guys they picked had 2 in 1 film each, and of course the 4 main guys. So yeah, I've loved James Bond, and I'm happy to join you to rank and give my 5 favorites, as you will too.
So was Sean Connery your favorite James Bond?
You know, I really like 3. I liked Roger Moore a lot too. He was a more comedic James Bond. I thought Sean Connery was more cooler, if you'll call him that. And I thought our last James Bond was terrific too. I was never as crazy about the other ones, including Pierce Brosnan. I didn't think he really fit the role that well, but obviously most people disagree with me because his films were quite successful. But for me, I liked 3 of them the best. I would say Sean Connery was probably my favorite.
Yeah, if I had one that I would say was my favorite, and it's not really a fair contest because, as I said, I really saw very few of the movies. I'd have to go with Roger Moore because I actually saw 2 of his, and those were the only 2 that I really enjoyed watching. So we'll go over the James Bond themes. A couple of interesting things about them. There are 26 James Bond themes in total. 13 charted in the top 100, so a little over half. 6 charted in the top 10. But only 1 reached number 1. Do you know can you take a guess which one that was?
I'm going to say the one from The Spy Who Loved Me.
No, it was actually A View to a Kill by Duran Duran.
Really? Okay.
But actually the one you just said, that reached number 2, so you're pretty darn close.
What's funny, Duran Duran one was not one of my favorite songs.
Actually didn't make my list either.
Sorry?
So now we've already established the 2 did not make our list.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the other one because you and I talked a little bit. And although I'll just let everyone know, we didn't share what our top 5 was, but we both before the show said there was one that didn't make our list, and I'm going to get to that one in a second. Okay, I'll ask you another question. There is one performer who performed 3 James Bond themes. Do you know who that would be?
Wow, I do not know who that would be. And I'm a James Bond fan, but no, I don't know.
Shirley Bassey.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. She's the only one who performed more than one, in fact, and they brought her back in the 80s when she was like well past her prime, and she did the one for Moonraker.
Did she do Goldfinger?
She did.
That's what I thought.
So in total, 7 of the themes were nominated for Best Song at the Oscar. However, there was not a winner until 2012, which was Skyfall by Adele. And that was the one you and I both said that was not on either of our lists.
Did we say not? You're right. We did. You know, I'm not a huge fan of Adele. I think she's got an incredible voice, but I'm not a big fan of her songs. Fantastic singer, no doubt. When that song came out, I'm always impressed. I give her credit for her range and her ability, but not one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's how I feel about Adele too. It's not my type of music, so therefore the song did not make my list. I think it's an okay song, but it's definitely not one of my favorites. So let's get to our first favorites. I'll start with you. What was your number 5?
So my number 5 was an artist who I've always liked. I saw her in Las Vegas once in it was a downtown theater. I forget which one, might have been the Golden Nugget. And she's got a beautiful voice. It's all-time high. It's I think a beautiful song. I think she sings it so perfectly. And I listened to the song again, when I was making this list, and her voice control of the song to me is just incredible. She holds the notes, she holds the words, and I think she tells the story of her song extremely well. I thought it's a very beautiful song. It's I believe it's the last Roger Moore film, it's Octopussy. And to be honest, by then I found his movies were starting to fall a little bit, and he must have agreed because he was about done as well. But that theme song is my top 5. I thought it was a beautiful song. I love her as an artist. Interesting thing about this one was most of the songs were done by artists in their prime, although you did mention the one artist who did the 3 and was well past on the last one. She was actually past her prime when she did this song. She was a pretty big star, but she wasn't a top star. But she was perfect, I thought, for this song. I loved it. I thought she did great. It topped out at number 36 on the pop charts. It actually reached number 1 in adult contemporary. So for all those reasons, all-time high, and I won't sing it for you because I won't do as good of a job that she did.
Well, interestingly enough, that's my number 4. So I agree on all counts, and I was really surprised it only reached number 36 on Billboard because I remember that was actually played a lot when I was a freshman at university, and I felt like I heard that song all the time. And I guess number 1 on adult contemporary would explain that. But I agree, it's a fantastic song, and that was my number 4. So we're going to skip my number 4, but I'll get to my number 5 now.
And wait,
sorry?
Before you do, my comment is, that was one I was sure you wouldn't have. That's funny. So we both had the same song, so we both agree on that.
Well, with that one, it just sometimes songs just remind you of a time and place, and that just really reminds me of my time in London, Ontario, and as a freshman, and lots of exciting things going on. First year of school, first year away from home, all that kind of good stuff. And as I said, that song was constantly on the radio, so I was really surprised that it only reached number 36. I thought that would have been much higher. Didn't get nominated for an Oscar, but it was. I will tell you one thing: it was only the second video that was made for a Bond film, and I actually do remember the video.
Cool.
So I'll do my number 5. I went with this was my most current song. When I did my top 10 favorite Oscar songs that actually made it, I kind of wanted to have a more current artist because when I got to that 10th song, it was like I could have picked any one of 4 or 5, and I said, well, I don't want everything to be kind of from the 80s or from the 70s. So I went with Billie Eilish, No Time to Die, and I thought that was fair to have as my 5th favorite Bond song. It was the first of 2 Oscars won by the young artist. She's becoming a Burt Bacharach, as it were, winning all those Oscars. Interesting thing, her and her brother Phineas were writing songs for James Bond from the time they were kids. So it was like a dream of theirs to actually have a James Bond song. And sure enough, not only did they have a James Bond song that was used in a movie, it actually won the Oscar. Now, that was 2020. Not trying to put down what she did because she won a second Oscar, but she probably didn't have the same kind of competition she would have had in a regular year because the amount of movies and everything else that was released that year was very slowed down due to COVID. That's not to say she wouldn't have won anyway. However, that song also won a Grammy, a Golden Globe, and a Critics' Choice Award. It really pays homage to old James Bond films. So even though they're very young artists, it still features that same classic elements of the memorable Bond themes, including that slow build, dark, shivery theme and dramatic orchestration. So I thought the two of them did a great job, and that's my number 5.
You didn't see that movie?
Sorry?
Did you see that movie?
I
No,
did
right?
not. No. No, I'll let you know when I saw a movie.
The two you saw were both the Roger Moore ones, right?
Right. Well, and I saw one other one.
Okay. I thought that's a good choice. Not on my list, but that's a good choice. I thought the movie was pretty good. It's obviously got an unfortunate ending, but maybe an apropos ending for Daniel Craig to finish time in the role. Interesting film. It revealed a lot. So I like the film, and I'd like your choice.
So what's your number 4? Because I already gave you my number 4.
So I'm going to give you another one from the 80s. It's For Your Eyes Only. I thought that was a really good song. It's, at the time, Shana Easton was kind of an up and coming. She was already well known, but she became more well known. But they decided to go with an up and coming star. I think that she's the only singer to actually ever appear in the actual movie as she's doing her song. I believe she's in the eye of James Bond. Something that's quite different. I think that's also might be the first Roger. No, it's not the first Roger Moore song, but it's a Roger Moore movie. But it is another Roger Moore movie. There was an interesting quote that he made, or whatever, a comment that he found that her doing the song was one of the sexiest parts of the movie, actually, more so than even the ladies who appeared with him. I thought it's a beautiful, beautiful song. I think she does a great job of it. And so for those reasons, she's number 4. Another interesting thing about it was, I believe Blondie was actually picked to do the song and got pushed out somehow. I don't really know the politics of that. But Blondie went ahead and made her own song called For Your Eyes Only, not the same song. So there are 2 For Your Eyes Only songs, but I'm sticking with the one by Shana Easton. I think she did a great job, and that's my number 4.
I actually really like that song a lot. It probably would be number 6. As a matter, it came down to that one and the Billie Eilish one, and as I said, in kind of in that tie scenario, I kind of decided let's go with the more modern one. But I think that song's a fantastic song. It got all the way to number 4 on Billboard, and it was one of those songs that was actually not nominated for the Oscar. So happy to say that. So let's do my number 3. Hey, I had to pick this one because I love Paul McCartney and the Wings. So I went with Live and Let Die. That is from a Roger Moore film. This was actually just before Paul McCartney was really establishing himself as a solo artist. He had a little bit of a slower start, not that, slow by his standards, considering he was the Beatles. And this was actually recorded during the Red Rose Speedway recording when they were doing that album. It peaked all the way at number 2 on Billboard, but it got to number 1 on the Cashbox chart. Now, one of the things was Paul McCartney wrote the song. The producers wanted Shirley Bassey to sing it, so that would have been number 4. But Paul McCartney said, nope, we're going to sing this song. So it's really the first one performed by a rock group, and it's also the first one to get nominated for an Oscar. I personally would have picked it, but it lost to The Way We Were. It lost to an all-time classic, so even though it wouldn't have been my choice, I would have picked this song. I can't really argue with it, considering, what a classic The Way We Were is. So I can't argue with it. But nevertheless, I went with Live and Let Die, number 3 by Paul McCartney and the Wings.
So you have now removed my number 1 selection because that's my favorite Bond song. It's a little different than the others. All my others are sung by women, which I think is apropos because James Bond is a spy and he's got all the action stuff, but there's always a lot of romance, love, and a sexy kind of movie. And I thought that women singing the songs really fit. I just thought it was a good fit. But this one, like you said, it's a rock and roll song. It's the first one like that. Um, I've actually seen him perform it, I think, on 4 times. I've seen Paul McCartney 4. It's the shows are usually pretty similar. He has these little fireworks and these pyro things going on, and it's one of it's maybe his best song he does when he does the performance, and it's just such a high octane, high energy song. It really fits perfectly, and I believe this was Roger Moore's first James Bond movie. So I thought it really, for all these reasons, for me, it's my favorite Bond song. It's got action, it's fun. I love Paul McCartney. He's one of my all-time favorite artists, both with the Beatles and without the Beatles. One interesting thing I found when I went to see Paul McCartney, and I think a lot of people do, is you forget how many great songs he had after the Beatles, not just with the Beatles. And so for all these reasons, this is actually my favorite Bond song.
Yeah, what I on the other show that I'm on from time to time, Grant's Rock Warehouse, we did a favorite non-Beatles song, and I had a hard time keeping this one off just because I had to take all 4 Beatles. It probably would have been in my top 10 if we were just doing Paul McCartney, but because I had to think about George and Ringo and John, it didn't quite make the list. Nevertheless, I'm happy to put it number 3 on this list. Yeah, it's interesting when you look at James Bond, how frequently they went with, let's say, rock and roll groups or bands, as it were. Not that often. One of the ones that stuck out was "The World Is Not Enough" was done by the '90s band Garbage. So that was a song called "The World Is Not Enough." So and they were kind of past their prime, I believe, by the time they did that. So that was interesting. They were kind of I don't know. I kind of look at them as a 2 or 3 year wonder sort of group. But
At the Academy Awards, I had the exact same feeling when I checked out the song. And I actually thought it had won for some reason because I had forgotten that it didn't. And I looked, I said, well, how could it not have won? But I saw The Way We Were. I get it. I'm with you. I would have picked this song over The Way We Were, but I totally understand Barbra Streisand is one of the greatest vocalists ever, frankly. And that is a great song. And so I understood them picking that one as the first. I think, but for her song, it's almost like poor Phil Mickelson having to play Tiger Woods. I think had you not had that song, I think that our song would have won for sure. I think it's deserving. It was just up against an all-time great song.
I think also, though, the Academy was kind of slow to pick up rock and roll music in that particular category, and there is a lag when you look at best Oscar nominations and current music, and they tend to stick to more kind of that formula type of movie song, and it did take them a while to start. So the fact they even embraced it and gave it a nomination was pretty good on its own.
Yeah.
Did we do your number 3? I don't think, because we know that's your number 1.
So to be honest with you, my 1 and 3 could almost be interchanged. My 2 is different. I'm going to leave it at 2 for other reasons, which I'll get to. But 1 and 3 were very close to me as to which one to pick. I've always loved Carly Simon, and I thought the song "Nobody Does It Better" is just a fantastic song. It also struck a chord with me because you mentioned on one of the songs having to do with what was going on with your life at the time. That one was the same with me. I remember it was in my early 20s. And a lot of things were happening in my life in a good way. And I just remember that song coming out. I always kind of felt somehow connected with James Bond in my own weird way, maybe my own desire to be a James Bond type of character. But when that song came out, I thought that was the most perfect James Bond song. And Carly Simon, like I said, was great. I thought it's one of her best songs, although she has so many. But that's my number 3 song, but it could have been my number 1 song as well.
Well, I got to tell you, that's my number 1, and I'll tell you this, it wasn't even close. So there's only one James Bond movie that I actually went to go see in a theater, and that was The Spy Who Loved Me.
Mm-hmm.
And that song started off the movie. I don't know if I knew the song before I actually saw the movie or not, but I do know that right after I went to go see the movie, I went out, got this single, probably from Discus in the Cavendish Mall. Still have it, because I still have a lot of my 45s. And I agree with you. So that song did get nominated for the Oscar. And and I will tell you that I do not like the choice that they picked that it won instead of, and that was "You Light Up My Life" by Debbie Boone.
That's right.
Now, what's interesting about that year, and I don't know if you watched my Saturday Night Fever show, but I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Grant Arthur. How many song nominations do you think Saturday Night Fever got? And it was that same year of Nobody Does It Better, and also of You Light Up My Life. So now there's 3 more slots.
I'm just going to be silly and go with my gut here and say 0.
Yeah, it got 0 nominations. That movie, it was the highest selling soundtrack of all time. Oscar did not nominate How Deep Is Your Love, did not nominate Staying Alive, and probably both of those songs are played more frequently than either of the two we're talking about. And I personally think Nobody Does It Better is played more frequently today than You Light Up My Life. I think it's a much better song. It's a power ballad. You Light Up My Life. It's on a bunch of lists of people who say it's the worst song ever. I don't go that far. It's an extremely bland, vanilla formula movie song, and everything about it is vanilla from the singer to the family, everything about it. But it's a pretty song. She does sing it beautifully. I don't take that away from her, but I just think this was such a better song, and I remember watching that on Oscar night, being so disappointed that this song didn't win. I was already pretty angry that they actually didn't nominate a single song from Saturday Night Fever. But having said that, I would have picked this over any song in Saturday Night Fever.
Well, I definitely think this is a better song than You Light Up My Life. And I remember seeing that had won over this, and I was kind of shocked. Again, You Light Up My Life, it was a nice song. I remember hearing it a lot. It was fine. Was it the best song in the movie that year? Not even close. Just a question for you. If you were going to pick one song at a Saturday Night Fever, which this show is not about, which one would you have nominated?
My personal favorite is probably Night Fever, but I probably would have picked How Deep Is Your Love.
Yeah. I would have gone with Your Love as well.
However, I think the song that has had the longest staying power is Staying Alive.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So let's see, where are we at? I think I'm at my number 2. So my number 2, here's what I'll say. Nobody Does It Better is my favorite, and it's not even close. But my number 2 to me is James Bond. Because, as I said, my introduction to James Bond was I was a very little kid. I don't even know if I was 10. You played this movie on television, Goldfinger. And what I still remember resonated with me about that particular movie was the song. It just sounded and I've always liked that song. I think and at the time that song sold 1 million copies. It peaked at number 8. So it was the first big hit from a James Bond film. It was only the 3rd film, so there wasn't that much of a chance. But I just remember that watching that movie with you, and that's what I remember about it. Other than that, I don't remember too much about the movie. I remember there was a guy with a hat, that there was a blade or something, and he was throwing it around. I think there was somebody who was painted gold in the movie, if I recall. It's been that long, but I actually did watch that movie with you. But that's what I do remember the song. And as I said, I tended to play this CD a lot, and there's a lot of fantastic classics on this. I kind of felt bad leaving out songs like Thunderball and You Only Live Twice. Another honorable mention for me was From Russia with Love. I think that's a really good song as well. But nevertheless, when I think of James Bond, I think of Goldfinger. And I think that I don't know, there's something about that one, that Goldfinger. It just that's James Bond for me. So that's my number 2.
And in fact, the bad guy was named Goldfinger, I believe. I think one of the shocking things about that movie was early in the movie when they painted that poor girl gold and she died.
Oh, wow.
Breathe. I thought it's an all-time classic movie. It was the first time I went to go see the 3 movies. That was my favorite of the 3. And so for that reason, I also locked that in as number 2. I said 1 to 3. I was going back and forth as to whether I liked the Paul McCartney song or if I liked Nobody Does It Better. But I was absolutely dead set on making Goldfinger number 2 because Goldfinger, to me, is the true launch of James Bond. It was the most successful one at the time. The first 2 did well, but it was Goldfinger that really launched James Bond into being this incredible, spy, sexy, strong. I mean, every guy wanted to be James Bond. Every woman wanted to be with James Bond. And, it just seemed to me like that was the movie that really just moved the dial, almost like the 97 Masters for Tiger. To me, James Bond Goldfinger is a similar kind of thing that just shoots the James Bond series off. And so I'm with you. Wow, we really have a lot of similarities on our picks.
Yeah. Well, let's play a few bars of Goldfinger. All right, so that's Goldfinger. So I'm just going to review my 5, and I'm going to ask you to do the same because we're kind of finished because our lists were so darn similar.
Yeah.
So my number 5 was No Time to Die, the Oscar-winning song by Billie Eilish. My number 4 was All Time High by Rita Coolidge. My number 3 was Live and Let Die by Sir Paul McCartney and the Wings. Goldfinger was number 2 by Shirley Bassey, and my number 1 was Nobody Does It Better by Carly Simon. So maybe you just go over yours because we were kind of jumping around a little bit there because we had so much similarity.
Yeah, my list is similar. I have All Time High at 4. I have it at 5. Your honorable mention song, For Your Eyes Only for Me, comes in at number 4. Number 3, and as I said, 3 and 1 could have been interchanged, but number 3 for me was Nobody Does It Better. Number 2 was locked in, Goldfinger. For all the reasons I said, I just think the Goldfinger launched James Bond. And then I'm just such a huge Paul McCartney fan, and I just thought the song was so great that Live and Let Die is my number 1 James Bond favorite song.
So essentially our 1, 2, and 3 are exactly the same, except just ordered slightly different. Actually, our 2 is the same, and our 3 and 1 are interchangeable. So there you go.
And our 5 and 4.
So actually, what would be your honorable mentions? Mine, as I said, would be From Russia with Love, and with the other song you said, and now here we am. I'm forgetting what I said it was, but nevertheless, not All Time High. The other one.
I would pick the Duran Duran song.
Yeah, that is a good song. I always liked Duran Duran. Duran were never like my favorite. It was like yeah, I always like to hear them on radio. But to be honest, I've never gone out and bought a Duran Duran album for whatever reason.
And also, I'm picking mostly, well, not mostly, 4 to 5 are female singers, 1 male singer. So I had to get another guy in there to kind of even it out a little bit, but that wasn't really the reason. I did like Duran Duran, and I thought it's a pretty good song. It's a little bit more modern, not super modern, but more modern than some of the others I picked. So I thought it was a good song. I liked it. Thought I liked the movie. Thought the movie was pretty good. I mean, I pretty much like all the James Bond movies. Some I didn't like as well as others, but there were none I ever walked out of that I said, "Oh, I didn't like that movie." I always did. As I said, I found as each artist, as each actor was nearing the end of his time as James Bond, I found the movies were slipping a bit. Maybe they were less interested. Maybe I was just getting bored of that actor. But then every time they replaced them, I always thought it was a pretty good launch. I mean, I always thought people did a good job. I mean, I'll tell you what, I like the Tim Dalton movies pretty well too. It was interesting. He signed to do 3 movies. He did 2. And then there was some sort of a legal dispute on the 3rd, which delayed filming by quite a few years. By the time it came to filming the 3rd, he wasn't sure he wanted to continue. The James Bond people wanted him to continue, so they tried to push him back in, but they wanted him to sign for 3 or 4 more movies on top of that one. He didn't want to do that, and that's why he was out so quickly after 2. Pierce Brosnan was supposed to be in it before Tim Dalton, but he was tied up in the TV show he was doing. And when the TV show found out, when Remington Steele found out that he might be picked, they immediately started filming a new season, and they made it impossible for him to join. But in the end, he did join. I know he was a popular James Bond. As I said, he was not my favorite, but he was fine. He was good. But I love James Bond, and I'm especially happy that you asked me to join to do these 5 choices with you. Is a topic I like.
Okay, well, I always like doing a ranking show, so I'm going to come up with some more. And Robert, thanks for joining me tonight. So that's episode 6. The next episode, still deciding what we're going to do, but you can count on there being something. If you do like what we're doing here, please give me a like and hit subscribe, and we'll continue to do these shows. Thank you for joining, everybody.